Hello, I hope you're doing great. Today, we are going to talk about how you are losing time and money when using Angular instead of using better technologies such as Blazor. Now, before we continue, please remember to visit fairplaytube.bticostarica.com, click the Buy Me a Coffee icon, and select a donation of your preference. This will help us keep the videos and products free for you. So let's start. When you create web applications, full complex web applications that need to be high quality applications, there are certain things that you need to do. Couple of things that you need to do is that you need to do or you need to have data entry validation, right? Data entry validation means that you need to have all of your data entry, like the drop downs, selections validated, that and the data selections, the text box, right, or the text inputs, all those fields where you can place data, you need to validate that there is no invalid data, right? For example, if you have a form when you are asking a required address or name or ID or whatever else uh, is required in your application, you will need to specify to the HTML or to the models that those fields are required. Also, if your data or a specific field in your data access must not be longer than a certain amount of characters, you need to specify that in the front end, in the HTML or in the models, so that there is so that the data or those forms are not even sent to the server just to be returned because of a validation error that should be done in both client and server, right? And that if you don't do, you will probably get an exception from the database um, because the data um, does not fit the maximum specified size for the column, right? Okay, now when you do data entry validation, you actually need to do it in both places, your client and in your server, if you are using or if you are creating like full web applications, which are usually a combination of a client or front-end technology with server-based APIs, right? That means that you can invoke your APIs usually without having to do it directly from your applications, right? So, as a general rule, you need to also validate the same, or you need to apply the same data entry validations on your server side, right? Because you never know when that data is going to be sent from additional places other than your front-end application. And um, actually, lately, and from a couple of years ago, one of the trends has been that the APIs are utilized for a lot of applications, especially in microservices and things like that, right? So it becomes even more strict and necessary to have the data entry validations in your APIs. Okay, so let's see. These are a couple of validations that you will have like in TypeScript and in Angular, right? So let's see, these are some validations that we have in Angular, right? And well, this is a lot of this is HTML, right? And uh, some things that we have, for example, this is an input field which is going to be required, and it will have a min length of 4 characters, right? Um, then we have in here the same, right? This using the reactive form. So you see validators.require, validators.minLength, and we pass 4. However, one of the things that you will see in here is that, for example, this min length is not, um, it's just a constant value. So it means that if you need to validate that in your server, you need to do, and you will probably do another hardcore value in your server. And if for some reason you change the minimum length, you need to go and change it in both places, which is actually very, very bad, right? Because you need to have that maintenance in both places due to the fact that these are different technologies. For example, you are doing um, your front end on Angular, and then your API, you are doing it in um, .NET, in web APIs. So you need to figure out a way to solve those issues, right? When there is just a couple of fields, there is no problem. However, when you have a full application that is big in size and it has a lot of classes and it has a lot of forms and a lot of data entry, the maintenance becomes really, really, really um, time consuming for necessary things that could have been done in a better way with other better technologies. Okay, other things that we have in here, not only validations, however, internationalization. Okay, so when you are creating your full applications, especially in the globalized world, and when your applications are going to be used throughout the globe, one of the things that is really, really recommended to have and actually necessary for better user acquisition is to support internationalization. Basically, allow your application to be displayed in multiple languages, and even further, multiple regions. Remember that a lot of countries or regions have different set of cultures, right? United States English, English from the United States, English from United Kingdom, Spanish from Spain, Spanish from Latin America, right? Spanish from Mexico, a lot of different locales that will have their differences, right? Now, one of the common ways to do this in Angular is using the I18N, or the internationalization um, library that is easily integrated with Angular, right? And you basically have like a XLF file, right, which all of your um, transcriptions, right? So you see that in here, we have this is for data type HTML, right? The source is this one, and the target is this one, right? And it says the source language is this, right? And the output language is based on the name of the file, where you see that it has the culture, in this case is for French, right? So therefore you see the source in English and the target in French, right? So this is for this one. Now, this is only for the client side, right? If you are using web APIs, you also need to apply the internationalization to your server, especially if you are returning errors or information from your server. It does not make sense, and it's actually horrible to see applications being in one language in the client side, and when you are retrieving messages from the server, seeing those messages in another language, right? Therefore, you need to have another implementation of internationalization in your server side, right? Which means you probably need to have another set of files for the um, for this kind of stuff, right? Uh, in .NET, you usually will have like resource files, right? Which is kind of the common trend to do that. Resource files, which will have that based on some keys that you will have, right? And then when you do requests to your server side, you need to have the language as part of the request, so your server side understand in which um, language or culture locale um, you need all of the information to be returned from. Now, if you are working with things like Angular and .NET, this means that you need to have that in two different technologies. So basically, a lot of your internationalization code will be kind of duplicated because you need to do it in both in a couple of places, right? So again, when this is when it is on the small applications, it is okay. It does not really represent a problem. However, when you are working on big applications, this actually become extremely time consuming and boring even, right? And then you will see that as soon as you change things like your form, right? Or some fields or something in there, you might need to go and change your front end, and probably in some cases you will also need to go and change the things on your server side, right? Uh, However, when you are using other technologies, other better technologies, you will be able to reduce the need to do that a lot, right? So let's see a couple of things of what I am talking about in code, right? Or how Blazor actually solves that. So give me a second and we'll open Visual Studio and see how things can be much better when you use Blazor. Okay, so give me a second, please, and we'll see. Okay, so here is Visual Studio. This is the code for Fairplay 2. As you have seen, or as if you have been following the channel, you know that Fairplay 2 has a public code in GitHub, and you can see how it works, right? You also have probably seen that Fairplay 2 supports localization, right? And it has currently available a couple of languages, right? So the validations, one of the cool things that Blazor has is that it allows you to reutilize your models, right? So I am using my same model for both the front end and in the API methods, right? And in the models, I have data annotation driven validations. That means that the framework itself will do most of the validations automatically in both front end and server side because they are the exact same model. So if you see in here, I have this edit form when the model where the model is this upload video model, right? If you see around down here, we have things like the max length is the video name max length, right? Which I actually get it from the configuration. And if you see in here, this max length is actually retrieved from the upload video model.name.length. This is actually a bug. This should be retrieved from um, the data annotation. So that's something I need to fix in there, right? But this should basically come from the name property. Here you see a string length attribute, right? So a string length attribute is going to be 35, right? And it comes from the resource name, upload video model localizer name too long, and the resource type is from the upload video model localizer. So the framework itself will go and validate this property, um, what this error is, right? It will validate the text, and if the text is not from this size or it has a size longer than this size I'm having in here, then it will fail, right? So it will fail in the front end when I am sending from this front end. And if I do an API call with this same model, it will also fail because of the validations. So it will give me validation errors in both front end and direct API calls because I will be using the exact same model. And I haven't had to create two different places to do this kind of validation in both the front end and in the server side. It's just one validation. It's just one place where I have the validations. And the same is um, for the text M3, right? For things like required and the other set of validations. The required will actually be executed automatically because the form will validate that, right? So I have the required, I have the string length, and I have the regular expression, right? Which it has a string validating the file names, right? Or the valid name formats. And I have the same or a lot of other validations for the rest of the fields. For the description field, we have that it has a string length of 500 characters and it is required. For the source URL, uh, we have the validation that it is an URL and the string length is a maximum of 500 characters. For the max video price, I have in here a range and the where the mean video price has to be 0 and the max video price has to be 100, right? So all of these are data notation driven validations that will be executed or validated in both places, in my front end and in my API calls. So basically, I am saving a lot of times avoiding to duplicate uh, those validations in multiple places. My models are the ones which have the validations, right? And the server will execute it based on that, based on how .NET Framework works. And since Blazor is .NET Framework or is part of .NET Framework, it will execute the same logic for validations, right? So I am saving a lot of time doing this. I'm keeping the quality of the code, avoiding to duplicate a lot of unnecessary stuff in different formats, right? And therefore, I'm also saving a lot of time, which translates in saving money if I am paying developers. If I am a company and I'm paying developers, I need to think as a business and how to optimize the money I am paying them while getting the better results in terms of efficiency, right? Because the longer it takes for my developers to finish a product or finish some functionality, the longer it takes or the more time it takes to deliver to my customers. And depending on how you have your project, the longer you have to wait to get paid. So it is really, really smart to optimize and reduce the code duplication in your applications. Okay, now this is only for validations. Now let's go back to localization. As you have seen in here, I have things like lock, localizer, and you see that in here I have this localizer and I am passing it a key, right? I am using constants for the key, so I don't have hard-coded strings in the HTML. But you see that it says get information from the localizer where it has this key, right? And the way this works is, okay, I'll get the key or the value that this key has, right? So localizer, this key, right? And I decided to do this part or the default value of the keys. I decided to do it um, hard coded in here, at least this constant or the key name, because I designed a small trick to automatically insert a lot of this data or the default data into the database because my localization is data driven and we will be creating a localization maintenance for persons to improve the generated translations, right? Because the translations are actually translated using Azure Translator and they will have some good quality, but they will not also they will not always be uh, extremely good, or they might not always make sense the way they are automatically translated because automatic translations are not perfect, right? And anyway, translations depend on the context of your application. Okay, of the context of how those are going to be applied, right? So I have this resource key, and the default value will be, in this case, for name text key, it will be named, right? For the upload, it will be upload, etc., 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 right? However, the way to get information is like this, with this localizer, right? So it will get the localizer, it will get the value of the name text key, and this localizer is already designed, so it gets the information from um, the resources that are retrieved from the database, right? And if we go to, I believe it's on the services where I had some links localizer already. Let's see, payout service. I'm not sure if I have in here. Okay, I haven't finished the localization in the server side because that was the last thing that I did. However, you will see that I have this key in here, right? Final references. Throw new custom validation exception. For example, if the video job empty is null, I want to throw a validation exception, and I want this message to be localized. So basically, I send the message from the localizer in here, job not found. This is the exact same approach that I am using in the front end, except that in this case, I am using custom validation logic, and I am throwing a custom error, right? This logic is not from the models themselves. It is custom validations from my own. However, if we go to the controllers, and if we go to something like the video controller, you will see that in the upload video model, upload video endpoint, I'm sorry, we have this upload video model, and this upload video model is the same model that we were using in the front end. In this case, I am using the exact same model, and the validations will actually come from here. In terms of localization, as I was saying, I can use things like this, right? So, as you have seen, my server side, it pretty much uses the same logic and reutilizes the same engine or the same mechanisms for both validations and localization. Therefore, I am saving a lot of code, avoiding to have duplicated validations or duplicated um, translation mechanisms, which means that I'm also optimizing my development time because I am using Blazor instead of other applications or other technologies such as Angular that by their nature of being different technologies, they won't easily allow me to do this, right? So this is one of the reasons why Blazor is much, much better. So when you create big applications, you have seen, for example, in Fairplay 2, this is not a small application. This is an application which has a lot of stuff, best practices, right? It has, as I was saying, it has validations, right? Data entry validations. It has localization, right? And localization in both client and server, trying to utilize most of the code, right? So one of the purposes in Fairplay 2 actually is to show how you can maximize code reutilization, right? And optimize your development and avoid code duplication to have a better quality of the code. The other thing that comes really, really handy from Blazor is that since you are reutilizing a lot of your models, you are also reducing the amount of automated tests that you need to do. Because a lot of the tests, you will only have to do them once for one technology, especially if you are doing unit tests against your models, right? So that's another great thing of using Blazor. Thank you very much. I hope this video has been useful. Remember, you can see FairPlay2 code in GitHub. If you go to FairPlay2, you will see that in here you can expand this arrow, and in here you can click this link, and this link has the code for FairPlay2, and you will see how we are doing a lot of this stuff to optimize the development and stop wasting time duplicating things like the internationalization or the data entry validations that you will need to that you will usually need to duplicate in other frameworks such as Angular because of their nature of being a different technology than your than your APIs or your server side. Have a great day.